Your kids are too old for toys anyway. My mother-in-law, Barbara, smirked as she supervised the workers transforming my children's beloved playroom into her daughter's baby nursery. They should focus on studying. She ran her hand over the newly painted pale pink wall, admiring her handiwork. Jessica's baby deserves a proper nursery. Besides, Emily and Noah spend too much time playing when they should be preparing for their future. I stood in the doorway of what had been my children's sanctuary for the past 5 years, watching helplessly as the workers dismantled the carefully curated space my husband, David, and I had created. The reading nook where Emily practiced her storytelling, the art corner where Noah discovered his passion for drawing. All of it was being stripped away to make room for a baby that wasn't even born yet. My name is Olivia Chen, and at 35, I never imagined I'd be watching my mother-in-law systematically dismantle my children's happiness in our own home. I'm a pediatric nurse, which makes the irony of this situation even more painful. I spend my days creating safe spaces for children, only to come home and find my own kid's space being violated. Mom, please, I started, trying to keep my voice steady. The kids need this space. We discussed this. Discussed. Barbara cut me off with a sharp laugh. There's nothing to discuss. Jessica needs the nursery more than your kids need toys. David agrees with me. Of course he did, my husband, ever the dutiful son. Hadn't even warned me this was happening. I come home from my night shift to find workers already clearing out the playroom, Barbara directing them like a general commanding her troops. Emily, 9, and Noah, 7, stood behind me, their small hands gripping my scrubs. I could feel Emily trembling slightly. This room had been her refuge when she struggled with anxiety last year. The therapist had specifically recommended maintaining a consistent, safe space for her. Where are we supposed to play now? Noah asked, his voice small and confused. Barbara waved her hand dismissively. The garage is perfectly fine for storage. Maybe having fewer distractions will help improve your math grades. I felt my chest tighten at her casual cruelty. Noah had ADHD and worked twice as hard as his classmates to maintain his B average. The playroom had been essential for his movement breaks between study sessions. Barbara, I tried again. This isn't just about toys. This room is part of their therapy routine. Oh, therapy, she scoffed. In my day, we didn't need therapy. We needed discipline. Jessica never needed special treatment, and look how well she turned out. Jessica, Barbara's perfect daughter. The successful real estate agent who married a surgeon and was now expecting her first child. Never mind that she lived in a 5-bedroom house across town. Somehow, she needed this space more than my children did. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. A text from David. Mom says you're being difficult about the nursery. Just let her handle it. You know how she gets. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not in a dramatic, angry way. Instead, I felt an eerie calm settle over me as I watched the workers carry out the last of the toys. I remembered something my own mother had told me before she passed away. Sometimes the quietest moves are the most powerful. You're right, Barbara, I said softly, surprising her mid-rant about modern parenting. The kids should focus on their studies. She blinked, clearly thrown by my sudden agreement. Well, yes. Exactly. Emily, Noah, I turned to my children. Let's go get ready for dinner. We'll sort everything out later. As we walked away, I heard Barbara on the phone with Jessica. It's all settled, sweetheart. Your nursery will be perfect. Olivia finally saw reason. What Barbara didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been preparing for something like this for months. Every time Barbara undermined my parenting, every time David chose his mother's wishes over our children's needs, I'd been quietly building my backup plan. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I made a call to my lawyer, Marcus Thompson. It's time, I said quietly into the phone, stepping out onto our back porch. She finally crossed the line I was worried about. The playroom? Marcus asked, though I could tell from his tone he already knew. Yes, how quickly can we proceed? I heard papers shuffling on his end. Everything's ready. Are you sure about this, Olivia? Once we start. I'm sure, I cut him off. My children come first. Always. After hanging up, I sat in the dark for a while, looking at our house. From the outside, everything looked perfect, the kind of home Barbara loved to brag about at her country club. But inside, it had become a battlefield where my children were constantly losing ground to their aunt's future baby. What Barbara didn't realize was that she'd just given me exactly what I needed. The playroom, that unnecessary space she'd so casually demolished, was about to become the catalyst for changes she never saw coming. I'd learned from watching her operate all these years. Like her, I planned carefully. Unlike her, my plans weren't about control or dominance. They were about protection. I pulled up the photos I'd taken earlier of the workers clearing out the room, the ones showing Barbara directing them without any paperwork or permits. Next to them, I opened the document Marcus had helped me prepare months ago. The one that would make Barbara regret ever touching my children's space. My phone buzzed again. Another text from David. Mom says you took pictures. Don't make this difficult, Liv. It's just a playroom. Just a playroom. Just like it was just a boundary crossed when Barbara moved in without asking. Just an overreach when she enrolled the kids in activities without consulting us. Just a small thing when she rearranged our entire house to her liking. But this time, she'd messed with the wrong mother. I might be quiet, I might be patient, but I'd spent years documenting every overstep, every violation, every moment she put her daughter's wants above my children's needs. The playroom wasn't the beginning of her interference, but it was about to be the end. I sent a final text to Marcus. Start the proceedings tomorrow, and make sure Barbara gets the papers at her country club lunch. She loves an audience. Then I went inside to check on my children. Emily was still awake, clutching the stuffed giraffe that usually lived in her reading nook. Mom, she whispered as I sat on the edge of her bed. Are we really never getting our playroom back? I smoothed her hair back, smiling softly. No, sweetheart. We're getting something much better. Trust me. Barbara had no idea what she'd started, but she was about to find out exactly what happened when you pushed a mother too far. The next morning, I arrived at work early, using the quiet hours before my shift to finalize everything with Marcus. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Barbara, each one more smug than the last. The nursery painting is finished, much better than those childish murals. Ordered the most darling crystal chandelier, so much more appropriate than that silly cloud light fixture. Jessica is thrilled. She's coming to see it this afternoon. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the email Marcus had just sent. Everything was in place. Barbara would receive the papers during her weekly ladies' lunch at Oakwood Country Club. Her favorite audience would have front row seats to what was coming. At exactly 12:30 p.m., my phone lit up with a call from David. What the hell, Olivia? He demanded without preamble. Mom just called me in hysterics. What are these papers about a trust violation? I set down my coffee, keeping my voice steady. You mean the papers about the children's trust? The one my mother set up before she died? The one that specifically designated that playroom as a protected space for her grandchildren's use? Silence on the other end. The trust that Barbara, as a member of the household, signed an acknowledgement of when she moved in. That trust, David. That's ridiculous, he sputtered. Mom would never have signed. Check your email. I cut him off. Marcus just sent over the documentation. Barbara's signature is on page 3, right under where it states that any violation of the designated spaces could result in immediate eviction and financial penalties. More silence, then the sound of furious typing. I waited patiently as David found the email, imagining his face as he read through the documents. This says the penalty is $50,000, he finally managed. Per violation, I corrected. And since Barbara has been documented making changes to a protected space without consent, that's the first penalty. The second comes from using the space for someone outside the immediate family. And the third. Stop, David interrupted. Just stop. We can fix this. I'll talk to Mom. No, David. Not this time. Barbara has 24 hours to restore the playroom exactly as it was, or the penalties go into effect. And before you suggest fighting this, Marcus has already filed with the court. The trust is ironclad. I could hear Barbara's voice in the background now, shrill with panic. The thought of her standing there at her precious country club, surrounded by her judgmental friends as she read through the legal documents, gave me a satisfaction I hadn't expected. Mom's saying she'll move out, David said weakly. She's saying she'll go stay with Jessica. That's her choice, I replied. But it doesn't change the penalties. And David, this isn't just about the playroom. Marcus has documentation of every time Barbara has overstepped with the children. Every time she's ignored their needs in favor of Jessica's wants. Every time you've chosen your mother's demands over your children's well-being. What are you saying? I'm saying that if things don't change, really change, the next papers you receive won't be about the trust. They'll be about custody. The threat hung in the air between us. I heard Barbara's voice rise again in the background, probably already planning how to spin this to her country club friends. But for once, I didn't care about her dramatics. The children need their playroom back by tomorrow afternoon, I said firmly, exactly as it was. Every toy, every book, every piece of furniture. The therapist will be doing an inspection to ensure it meets their needs. If anything is missing or damaged, the penalties double. I hung up before David could respond. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear. For the first time in years, I felt truly in control. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of messages and missed calls. Jessica left a voicemail full of tears about her ruined nursery. Barbara's friends, who had witnessed her humiliation at lunch, were already spreading the story across their social circle. David kept texting, alternating between anger and pleading. I ignored them all, focusing on my patience and the knowledge that I had finally done what needed to be done. When I got home that evening, the house was in chaos. Workers were frantically trying to restore the playroom, supervised by a red-faced Barbara who couldn't quite meet my eyes. The crystal chandelier was gone, the pink walls were being repainted, and boxes of my children's toys were being carefully unpacked. "Mom," Emily called out, running to me with Noah close behind. "Grandma says we're getting our playroom back, and she's moving to Aunt Jessica's house." I hugged them both, watching over their heads as Barbara directed the workers with considerably less enthusiasm than she'd shown yesterday. "Is it true?" David asked quietly, appearing beside me. "About the custody papers?" "Yes," I replied simply. "I love you, David, but our children come first. They always should have. It's time for you to decide what kind of father you want to be, one who stands up for his children or one who only sees them every other weekend." He flinched at that, but I saw something shift in his expression. Maybe finally he was beginning to understand what was at stake. Barbara swept past us, arms full of pink nursery curtains. "I'll be out by morning," she announced, trying to maintain her dignity. "Obviously, I'm not welcome here anymore." "No, Barbara," I corrected her. "You're welcome to be part of this family. You're just not welcome to control it anymore." She stormed out, leaving David standing there looking lost. But I had no time for his confusion. My children were pulling me toward their partially restored playroom, eager to show me how everything was being put back in place. "Can we read in our nook tonight?" Emily asked, hopefully. Of course, I smiled. That's exactly what it's there for. The battle wasn't over. I knew Barbara well enough to expect more drama, more attempts to regain control. But watching my children's faces light up as their space was restored, I knew I'd made the right choice. Sometimes, the biggest victories come from the quietest fights. 3 months after the playroom incident, the changes in our household were dramatic. Barbara had indeed moved in with Jessica. Though not before attempting one final power play, she tried to argue that since she had improved the playroom with expensive renovations, we owed her compensation. Marcus shut that down quickly, pointing out that unauthorized modifications to a protected trust space actually increased her penalties. The $150,000 in total penalties went directly into Emily and Noah's college funds, as specified by the trust. Barbara had to sell her beloved country club membership to pay her share. Jessica's baby now had a beautiful nursery in her own house, where it should have been all along. But the biggest change was in David. The custody threat had shaken him deeply, forcing him to confront his role in enabling his mother's behavior. We started marriage counseling, and slowly I began to see glimpses of the man I had married returning. "I never realized," he admitted one evening as we watched the kids playing in their restored space, "how much I was letting Mom control everything. How much the kids were hurting because of it." The playroom had returned to its former glory with a few improvements. The children's therapist had helped us make it even more supportive of their needs. Emily's anxiety had improved significantly now that she had her safe space back, and Noah's grades had actually gotten better with access to his movement breaks again. Barbara, predictably, wasn't handling her loss of control well. She had tried to rally her social circle against me, but the story had backfired. Instead of sympathy, she found herself facing uncomfortable questions about her behavior. Several of her friends, it turned out, had been quietly disapproving of her treatment of my children for years. "Did you hear?" David asked one evening, trying to hide a smile. "Mom tried to join the Valley Creek Country Club, but apparently, they've instituted a new policy about family values and respecting grandchildren's spaces." I couldn't help but laugh. The social consequences were hitting Barbara harder than the financial ones. Jessica had been caught in the middle, her perfect nursery plans disrupted, but even she had begun to see things differently, especially after her son was born. "I can't imagine," she admitted during a carefully orchestrated family dinner, "someone taking away Ethan's space like that. Mom keeps suggesting changes to his nursery, and suddenly, I understand why you fought so hard." The trust remained our protection against future interference. Barbara had tried to argue that it was too restrictive, but as Marcus pointed out, she had no problem with its terms until they were enforced. Now, any major changes to the children's spaces required written approval from both David and me, with the therapist's input. 1 year after the incident, I stood in the doorway of the playroom, watching Emily help Noah with his reading. The space had evolved with them but remained their sanctuary. The cloud light fixture still cast gentle shadows on the walls. The reading nook was worn with love, and the art corner was splattered with evidence of countless creative sessions. David came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Mom called today," he said quietly. "She wanted to know if she could visit this weekend. I told her she's welcome, but the rules about the children's spaces are non-negotiable." And she agreed, actually agreed, without arguing. I think she's finally starting to understand. I leaned back against him, remembering that day a year ago when I had watched workers dismantling our children's happiness. The quiet rage that had driven me to finally take action. The satisfaction of knowing I had been prepared. You know what Emily said to me yesterday? I asked David. She said she feels safe here. Really safe. That's all I ever wanted for them. He tightened his arms around me. I'm sorry it took me so long to stand up for that. From the playroom, we heard Noah's excited voice as he finished reading a page by himself. Emily's patient encouragement, the sounds of our children thriving in their protected space. Barbara would probably never fully change, but she had learned an important lesson. Some battles aren't won with dramatic confrontations or loud arguments. Sometimes the quietest preparation, the most patient planning, yields the most powerful results. And in our house, with our children's laughter echoing from their restored sanctuary, that victory resounded louder than any of Barbara's protests ever had.